Snowflakes drifted lazily under the dim glow of the hospital's parking lot lights, muffling the world in silence. Emily Carter stood just outside the doors, her shoulders hunched against the bitter cold, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee gone cold. She hadn't taken a sip. She couldn't. Inside, behind her, monitors beeped. Somewhere, someone was coding. Another overdose. Another life teetering on the edge. It was the fourth tonight. The winter wind bit at her cheeks, but she barely felt it. Her mind replayed the image of a boy no older than her late brother, wheeled in pale and still. She had done everything right. Chest compressions. Adrenaline. Pleading with the universe under her breath. But the universe hadn't answered. She hated this hour, 3 a.m., when grief felt louder than ever, and the silence of the world echoed the hollow places inside her chest. The hospital lights behind her buzzed quietly. Her name was being called inside, but she didn't move. She needed air. Just a moment to breathe. A pickup truck rumbled to a stop nearby, its engine ticking as it cooled. A tall man stepped out, his boots crunching over fresh snow. He wore the thick navy jacket of a volunteer firefighter and walked with the heavy gait of someone who hadn't slept in days. "Hey," he called softly. "You all right?" Emily didn't look at him. "Fine," she said too quickly. He didn't leave. "You were the nurse on that crash victim earlier tonight, right?" he asked. She glanced at him. Tired brown eyes, a day's worth of stubble, and a look of quiet empathy etched into his face. "I'm Jake," he added. "Brought the kid in. Stayed until he stabilized." A pause. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did good." Jake nodded, but there was something in his expression that told her he didn't believe it. Like he, too, was carrying invisible wounds. "You ever wonder if it's worth it?" she asked suddenly, the question slipping out like breath. Giving so much, and still losing them. Jake looked at her for a long, silent moment. Then, gently, "Every day. But maybe we keep showing up for the ones we can save." The snow kept falling, soft and slow. And for the first time in weeks, Emily didn't feel so alone. She didn't know it yet, but this stranger had just stepped into her darkest hour. And neither of their lives would ever be the same. Emily Carter had once been the nurse with the brightest smile on the floor. The one who sang soft lullabies to scared children, who remembered every elderly patient's favorite TV show, who stayed an extra hour just to sit with someone dying alone. That was before Mason. Her younger brother had been only 22 when the accident happened. A hit and run. Middle of the night. He had called her just minutes before, twice. She was in the middle of a shift, deep in triage, and hadn't answered. When the call came in about a young man brought in without ID, something in her chest twisted. She ran. It was him. She tried. God, she tried. Hands shaking, chest compressions, tears mixing with sweat. But the line went flat. That was 2 years ago. Since then, Emily existed on autopilot. Her kindness remained, but it was quieter now. Measured. Distant. She went through the motions, vital signs, IVs, discharge instructions, but the sparkle was gone. She avoided the pediatric ward. She no longer played music in the break room. Laughter had become a foreign language. She often worked nights, fewer conversations, less light. And no one asked how she was doing anymore. Maybe because she always answered, "Fine." But she wasn't. Jake Monroe understood what it was to live with ghosts. He had once been the golden boy of the local paramedics, first in, last out, brave to a fault. His calm under pressure saved more lives than anyone could count. But it also chipped away at him, bit by bit. He'd served during a major hurricane down south, deployed for weeks in flood-ravaged communities. He could still remember the smell of mold and gasoline, the silence of submerged streets, the desperate cries for help that sometimes came too late. But it was the little boy, 6 years old, clinging to a floating door, blue lips and wide, terrified eyes, that haunted him most. Jake had tried everything. CPR. Chest compressions. Rescue breathing. The boy died in his arms. Jake didn't go home that night. He sat in the back of the ambulance until sunrise, staring at the steering wheel, questioning every decision he'd made that led him there. He never wore his paramedic uniform again. Instead, he moved north, far from the water, from the memories. Took up work as a mechanic, volunteered with the local fire department on weekends. It kept his hands busy, gave him a sense of purpose. But the nights were long, and sleep rarely came. Jake didn't talk about it. Not with his parents, who thought he was doing much better now. Not with friends, who drifted away. Not with the therapist he saw exactly once. And then he saw Emily. The first time wasn't at the hospital, it was at the diner across from the firehouse, months before the crash call. She was sitting alone in a booth, her hair tied up messily, staring blankly at a plate of untouched pancakes. Something about her posture struck him, shoulders tense, jaw clenched, eyes somewhere else entirely. He knew that look. He lived it. He wanted to say something then, but didn't. So when she appeared outside the ER that snowy night, coffee cup trembling in her hands, the pain radiating from her like heat, he recognized it. The quiet kind of suffering. The kind no one noticed anymore. Over the next week, Jake found excuses to drop by the ER. A fire drill. A supply run. A minor burn victim who, just happened, to need supervision. Emily noticed, of course. She wasn't oblivious. But she didn't stop him. Somehow, the silence between them didn't feel empty. It felt like a space they were both quietly learning to fill. It started small, shared glances, brief smiles. Then conversation. Do you ever wonder why we do it? She asked one night, after a long double shift. Jake tilted his head. What? Save people. She nodded. Or try to, anyway. Even when it breaks us. Jake looked at her, really looked at her. Because it's who we are. Even if no one sees it. Even if it costs us everything. She didn't cry. But something in her softened. For the first time in months, she asked someone to join her for a late-night meal. And he said yes. Two broken people. Two quiet souls. Slowly orbiting each other. Gravitating towards something neither of them could name yet. But healing had begun. Not with grand gestures or tearful confessions, but with quiet presence. With someone simply choosing to stay. It was a stormy Tuesday night when everything changed. Heavy rain lashed the hospital windows, and thunder rolled through the city like a war drum. The ER was chaos, flooded roads, skidding cars, and a multi-vehicle pileup on the highway sent a flood of patients pouring through the doors. Emily moved with sharp precision, adrenaline keeping her upright. But her eyes were distant, haunted. She hadn't slept in almost 2 days. Her body moved, but her heart remained somewhere far away. She was stitching a boy's forehead when her hands began to tremble. At first, she ignored it. But then her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. The scalpel slipped from her gloved hand. Emily. Someone called. She stumbled back from the gurney, bracing herself against the wall. Her chest tightened. Everything spun. And then, someone was there. Jake. He had just dropped off a victim from the crash. Still in his soaked fire jacket, he rushed to her side without a word. One arm around her back, the other gently guiding her toward an empty chair. I'm fine, she mumbled, trying to push him away. You're not, he said, voice low but steady. And it's okay. I can't leave the floor. You will if you collapse, he said gently. She didn't argue. He helped her out of the trauma bay, past the chaos, into the quiet staff lounge. The overhead lights flickered. A vending machine buzzed. Someone's forgotten soup sat cold in the microwave. Jake crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. When's the last time you ate? She didn't remember. He stood, fished around in his coat pocket, and pulled out a protein bar, crushed on one end, probably ancient, but still sealed. Best I've got, he said with a faint smile. Emily stared at it, then laughed, soft, disbelieving. He sat beside her, watching her hands shake as she unwrapped it. Emily, he said quietly, you don't have to carry everything alone. She didn't answer. So he reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn, faded photo. A little boy with dark hair and dimples, smiling proudly in a firefighter's helmet. My nephew. Mason. Emily froze. My brother's son, Jake continued. Lived with me after my brother died. We were best friends. One night, during the hurricane, I couldn't get to him fast enough. I was out helping other people. By the time I got to the shelter, it was too late. Silence. I didn't talk about him for 3 years, Jake said. Not once. Until now. Her voice cracked. My brother's name was Mason too. They both looked at each other then, eyes glassy, hearts cracked wide open. Jake reached over and took her hand, not out of pity, but understanding. You saved people tonight, Emily. But you don't have to save everyone. She blinked, and the tears came. Not because she was weak. Because someone had finally seen her. And stayed. It wasn't grand or heroic. It wasn't the kind of rescue that made the news. But in that moment, as the storm raged outside and the hospital buzzed with crisis, Jake had given her something she didn't even know she was searching for. A place to fall apart without being alone. Kindness, pure and simple. A hand to hold in the dark. A love that didn't demand or fix, but stayed. And for the first time in years, Emily let go. Not completely. But enough. The storm cleared by morning, but something in Emily didn't return to how it was before. She walked back into the with the same messy bun, the same scrubs, the same badge clipped to her pocket, but her steps were different. Grounded. Present. She still looked tired, but not like someone trying to disappear. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had permission to breathe. Jake had waited outside that morning, leaning against his pickup, sipping burnt coffee from a thermos. He didn't expect a grand thank you or even conversation. But when she spotted him across the parking lot, she smiled. A real one. They didn't talk about the night before, not right away. But the silence between them was warmer now. Full of things understood, not needing words. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to overlap in quiet ways. Emily started eating again. Not just protein bars or vending machine crackers, but real meals, ones Jake sometimes dropped off during his late firehouse shifts. Chicken soup in thermoses. Banana bread wrapped in foil. She even found a handwritten note once inside her lunch bag. Greater than, still here. You're not alone. Jay. She carried that note in her wallet. Jake, in turn, led Emily in where no one else had been. One night, he invited her to the auto shop after hours. It smelled like grease and old tires, and his hands were blackened with oil. Why'd you bring me here? She asked. He shrugged. This is where I fix things. When I don't know how to fix myself. She nodded, and instead of pity, she rolled up her sleeves and helped him replace a rusted brake line. He taught her how to hold the wrench. She taught him how to stop apologizing for the quiet. And then something remarkable happened. Emily started humming again. Just softly, while cleaning wounds or sorting medication. The kind of absent-minded music that used to float through her shifts. Her coworkers noticed, but no one said anything. Except Karen, a veteran nurse who leaned over one evening during rounds. You're glowing, Karen whispered. Emily flushed. It's just better sleep. But it wasn't. It was being seen. Being held. Not physically, but emotionally, without pressure or expectation. Meanwhile, Jake started wearing his old paramedic jacket again. Not because he was ready to go back. But because one evening, when Emily was late getting off shift, he stood by the ambulance bay, helping a new EMT calm a nervous child. When the kid reached for his hand, something in Jake steadied. He didn't run from the memory of that boy he lost anymore. He honored it. One night, Emily finally opened the door to Mason's old room in her apartment. It had been untouched for 2 years. Shoes still under the bed. A game console frozen mid-download. She sat on his bed, the air thick with memory. Then she pulled out her phone. Jake picked up on the second ring. I opened the door, she said, her voice shaking. I know, he replied softly. You're doing it. Bit by bit. Grief didn't vanish. Trauma didn't rewrite itself. But something beautiful had begun to grow between them, not in the absence of pain, but in the choosing to walk through it together. Jake and Emily weren't rushing into love. It was a slow burn. A gentle unfolding. He started showing up during her morning breaks with black coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. She began bringing him old books she thought he'd like. War stories. Repair manuals. Even poetry, once. And in the small hours of the night, when the world went quiet, they started calling each other. Not to talk, necessarily, but just to be there. There was healing in those moments. Not the loud, cinematic kind. But the kind that matters most. 6 months later, the city was waking to spring. Emily stood in her brother Mason's room, sunlight pouring through the window. The air was warm, filled with the smell of freshly bloomed jasmine drifting in from the balcony. The room had changed, not erased, but softened. A memory, no longer a wound. His sneakers were still there, but now beside them sat a box labeled, "Things to donate." She'd kept a few things, his baseball glove, his hoodie, a photo of them smiling under 4th of July fireworks. The doorbell rang. Emily wiped her eyes and opened it to find Jake, holding 2 coffees and a bouquet of simple white daisies. "For the strong woman who taught me grief isn't the end," he said. She smiled, cheeks wet with quiet tears. "And for the man who showed me that love doesn't have to fix you, it just has to stay." They sat on her couch, coffee warm in their hands. For a while, they said nothing. They didn't need to. Then, out of nowhere, Jake pulled a folded envelope from his coat. "I wasn't sure when to give this," he said. "But I think it's time." Emily opened it. Inside was a letter. Written in a child's scrawl. "Greater than dear fireman Jake. Thank you for saving people like my uncle. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. Love, Mason T. Age 8. Emily's breath caught. Jake looked down at the floor. He wrote that letter to the station a few weeks before the hurricane. "We found it in the mailbox after he passed. I kept it all this time, but I think it was meant for you, too." She clutched it to her chest, eyes full. "You carried this for years." She reached out and took his hand, her grip firm. "You saved me, Jake. Not in one moment, but every day. Every little act." Jake shook his head gently. "No, Em. We saved each other." The silence between them settled like a warm blanket. In the distance, a siren wailed, fading into the city noise. Life would go on, loud, messy, unpredictable. But now, they were no longer just surviving it. They were living. Later that afternoon, they drove to the community garden Jake had helped restore after the hurricane. A patch of green in a city that often felt gray. Together, they planted a small flowering dogwood tree in Mason's memory. No plaque. No speeches. Just roots in the soil. A symbol of something broken that still had the power to grow. As the sun dipped low, Jake pulled Emily close, wrapping her in the warmth of arms that didn't promise to shield her from every storm, but promised to stand beside her through each one. And in that quiet golden hour, she finally believed that love, true, patient, healing love, wasn't just something from before. It was now. It was here. It was life-saving. Even in the darkest hour. Especially then.